Hello and welcome to the Swedish House of Finance ECGI Conference on Sustainable Finance and Corporate Governance. We are delighted for everyone who's here, and those who will join us through a recorded version of this a little bit later are also very welcome. This has been a pleasure to prepare this conference. There's so much interesting work in this area right now. I think working with ECGI has been a huge pleasure, and the organizing committee has found everything super convenient. And I'm sure many of you are here today through the excellent network that the ECGI provides for practitioners and academics with an interest in this area. This is lovely. Also, the support teams have been great, and I think everybody has figured out how to work Zoom. But should something go wrong, I apologize in advance. It could happen. I would also like to mention that we have some faraway participants for whom this is late at night or early in the morning, and I appreciate you accommodating our European afternoon schedule. We moved the conference so that it is Friday, Saturday, Sunday afternoon, Central European time, in order to make it more feasible for people to join from all around. But of course, it's not going to be perfect if you're in Hawaii. So we appreciate your participation especially. Okay, we have a great set of speakers today. Let me not go through all of them. I will mention them one at a time when we get there in the schedule. I will just start by mentioning that the day gets more academic as we progress. We're going to start by talking about life in the corporate governance jungle. What is it like out there? And my colleague, Sarah Jack, also a professor at the Stockholm School of Economics, will lead this conversation, and I hand over to you, Sarah.
I'm just going to try and share my screen. Hopefully it'll work. Okay. So thank you, Bo, for your kind invitation to join you today, and especially in today's activities. And thank you to everybody else who's also joined us today and taken the time to come and listen to us. So my name is Sarah Jack, and I'm the Jacob and Marcus Wallenberg Professor of Innovative and Sustainable Business Development at the House of Innovation, Stockholm School of Economics. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Peter Wallenberg Jr., the chair of the Nutt and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, the Marian and Marcus Wallenberg Foundation, and Wallenberg Foundations AB. And through his activities, Peter is also involved in the engineering industry, the private equity and the hotel business. He is also director on the boards of Atlas Copco, Scania, EQT, and is chairman of the Grand Group and the Royal Swedish Automobile Club. He holds a BSBA in Hotel Administration from the University of Denver and an International Baccalaureate from the American School Lace in Switzerland. Now, the Wallenberg Foundations are the ultimate owners of the companies in which the Wallenberg family has an involvement. The Foundation's core holdings consist of the majority of owned and publicly listed Investor AB and wholly owned FAM AB. These companies include some of Scandinavia's largest and most important blue chip corporations. And the Foundations grant funding to excellent researchers and research projects beneficial to Sweden, and have since 1917 granted over 35 billion Swedish kronor. And this equates to approximately 3.3 billion euros, which is a staggering amount of support. And grants are used to fund research in the fields of medicine, technology, natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, and archaeology. And given that the Wallenberg Foundations is the collective name for the 17 public and private foundations established by individual members of the Wallenberg family, I see this as a great opportunity for us to have Peter to join us on the stage, as it were, today. Now, the Wallenberg family business story started when André Oskar Wallenberg helped a friend to find the financial resources to expand a sawmill in the region of Dalarna, north of Stockholm in Sweden. He subsequently moved to Sweden and pursued an entrepreneurial career, founding Stockholm in Skellada Bank SEB in 1856. And from the start, the Wallenberg family have worked hard to support enterprise and research in Sweden and internationally. And the Wallenberg family has always been concerned with supporting companies of Swedish origin that are looking to grow their operations in international markets. And in building and developing its interests, the Wallenberg family tradition has primarily been to focus on innovation and long-term sustainability through financial vigilance. And this focus has continued, and today the fifth generation of the family, led by Jacob, Marcus and Peter Jr. Wallenberg, continues to work to support enterprise and research through its historical roots, and embedding the traditions which have been used to generate much of its long-term success. The general model is that family representatives do not work actively in the companies or other organisations they control, but they exercise their involvement, direction and control through positions in the boards of directors. And against that background, what we thought we would do through our session today is to engage in a conversation about the long-term governance of family business. And long-lasting family businesses do not only look at the financial result of the next quarter. Owners of enduring family businesses value their history and their future. And such family businesses often make decisions with a much longer horizon in mind. And this horizon is often with the next generation in mind as well. So a guiding principle for the Wallenberg's family's work in terms of how it organises its influences in the foundations and the business holdings is the betterment of the country of Sweden. So with these aspects in mind, we will begin today by exploring the subject of governance with Peter. And welcome, Peter Wallenberg. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll see what happens now. Oops.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So are you happy if we just get started?
Sure.
Thank you. It's a bit strange. It's, So Peter, to begin, can you tell us about what the main principles are when it comes to organising interests in the companies and foundations with which you work?
I mean, we talk about what we call our ecosystem, which means, you know, how is all of this put together? As you said, we are today 16 family foundations, and we take care of 17 foundations under the name Wallenberg Foundations, just to make it easy. And these foundations own stock in companies like Investor and our wholly owned FAM. Investor owns companies like Atlas Copco. You know that it's part of the Stockholm Stock Exchange in that sense. FAM is more of a privately run investment company, wholly owned by the foundations. And all the dividends that we do get from these investments goes back into the foundation's design, and 80% of that we give out every year to Swedish research and education. 20% we're allowed to reinvest, which means that we are still here after 117 years, to be honest with you. So in that sense, it's not a traditional family business because we as individuals don't own anything of it, but we are as a family the ones who are supposed to develop and continue to develop both the foundations as such, but especially the companies that the foundations have put their money into and invested in. And as you said, I mean, from our perspective, what we look at is long-term ownership, long-term responsibility. And we do that with the goal of seeing to it that we in the long term can also support the development of Sweden. So we're a strange family business in that sense, but it is forever as it looks right now.
And, you know, to me as well, when you talk about the ecosystem and the putting together for the betterment of Sweden, I think that's an incredible kind of thing that the whole kind of organisation or the ecosystem actually offers as well. So what kind of led things to being organised in that way?
Again?
What led to things being organised in this way?
being part of the fifth generation, a proud member of the fifth generation, it all started really in 1917 or 1916, 17, when Knut and Alice, who didn't have any children, and during their own lifetime, spent a lot of their own fortune on trying to help the development of Sweden around themselves. And at that time, there was a lot of social questions, but they also helped to build Stockholm Library and started to help to finance new buildings at Swedish universities and things like that. So, and when they became a little bit older, realizing with no kids and didn't want the family to fight over their fortune, they started the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation. And today that is Sweden's largest contributor to research and education. So that's really how it started. From then on, another 15 have done the same thing. Some have started while they're still alive and worked with it while they were still alive. I usually bring up, when I get this question, I usually bring up Berit Wallenberg, who was a lady that when I was a kid, I was pretty scared of, because she was a photographer and an archaeologist. But she was very short, she had big feet, she was always wearing really dark brown dresses and looked pretty scary. So every time we went to a family dinner, everybody of the kids ran into another room. But when I started to work with the foundations, I realized that she started her foundation in midlife. And her foundation is today, it's not a big foundation, but it's the most important foundation and contributed to research within archaeology and cultural history in Sweden. And I have to say that her way of thinking symbolizes the way that the family is trying to think, and that is, you know, we are fortunate to have jobs and things to do, and what can we do to see to it that we can use that in a longer term and see to it that we help others and the development of Sweden. So Berit, even though she's a small foundation, is one of my favorites.
That's really interesting as well. It shows how the family influence through all kind of stages has made the future as well and taken things forward. But was it difficult to set things up in this way, do you think?
It's probably controversial in 1917 that the rest of the family wasn't able to get a hold of the fortune of Knut and Alice. So that was probably like in any other family. But I think that after that was done, that has been the way that the family has been working. I have to admit that when I was younger, 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the foundations were not really the thing that we talked about. It was the businesses we talked about and everything that the foundations really owned. But the foundations were not the main topic. So when I started to know about the foundations was when I was brought in as a member of a board of a smaller foundation, just to learn what board work was all about. And then realizing that the family had been working by or through the foundations since 1917, and that the foundations was really the main platform of the family. And as you know, from the past 20 years, we worked very hard on seeing to it and form the ecosystem to see to it that people around us also understand that it is not the individual family members, it is the foundations that are. So I have to say, to answer your question shortly, it has worked out pretty well to work in a setting like this.
And how important is it for you to kind of unite around a set of values, of principles, and kind of build a vision for the future?
I think that's extremely important. And when we were younger, the generations before us, the way that they took this forward was to point with their whole hand, because that was the way it was at the time. what we are trying to do is to see to it that we work together with the next generation. So we have actually seen to it that we have a family constitution today, where the different generations have been talking about what are the values of the family, what is important for us, what does that mean for the foundation, what does it mean for the family as a whole. So today we watch much more, how should you say, on the same page within the family. We have something that we can lean back on and say that this is something that we all agree on. It's not that all and everyone will work within it, but this is the way that the foundations and the families work with the foundations will continue in the future.
And is there anything maybe specific or anything that kind of comes to your mind about what's really important in making this work? Because it's an incredible story.
Yeah, I think the main thing was to see to it that, I mean, we've been lucky to be three, me, my brother, and my cousin who's been working with this. My father was pretty much alone, and before that, there usually was two family members working with the family business, if one can use that term. And we now have a next generation with 32 people. Yeah, and you know, how do you see to it that they understand what we're doing, what the family is all about, and also see to it that they get an interest in what we're doing, because to work in a family setting like ours, if you're only out to make a huge amount of money, you're not supposed to work for us, to be honest with you, because it is all in the foundations. So it has to be a lot of heart. It has to be a lot of commitment from you as an individual. So it was important for us to see to it that we had somewhere to start in all of this, to get the next generation to be interested. And then we continued from that. I mean, we do have a general assembly every year where all family members can come in and ask questions. And we have a family working group where 3 people from the 5th generation, me, my brother, and my cousin, and 3 from the 6th generation, and the 3 from the 6th generation we change every year, and they choose themselves who should represent them in the family working group. So we're trying to find ways to see to it that we can help in a process that's going to be long.
And it's really fascinating, I think, that kind of that sharing that goes on within that process as well, and the fact that it is about building the future.
It is. It's all about that. But I mean, we're in the middle of it. It's easy for us to talk about it. But if you have 32 young people in the middle of their own career and try to see to it that they understand what all this is about. I mean, you know, you met Jacob and Husky. I mean, they travel a lot. They're never at home. Is that really what the next generation are looking for? Or does that make them scared, or they don't understand why? So we're trying to build something above that to see to it that they realize that it's all about our own commitment as individuals. I use myself as an example. I mean, I took a completely different route compared to my brother and cousin. I went into the service industry already when I was 15. I started to work after school and continued to do that and run hotels for 30 years. And none in the family had done that before. So of course, there's a lot from the next generation that says, if you don't go the business way, meaning the bank or investor or something, does that mean that you cannot go into the family business? And I'm trying to use myself as an example that, no, you can actually grow into that too. So it's all up to you. It's your own, you know, your own thoughts, ideas, and commitment that is the one, the thing that counts.
And what do you think kind of makes, you know, the next generation and your generation buy into that kind of understanding, I suppose?
Well, I hope they will. We're still working hard. We've been doing this for the past 6-7 years. We got our family constitution in place, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So it's still something that, we're working very actively on, but we are trying to bring them with us in different things that we do. I bring them to the universities when I work, when I represent the foundations, I bring them with me. My brother and cousin brings them with them when they do other things, just to give them an idea. Not all of these 30 people are going to work for the foundations going forward, but I hope and I think actually that everything that we do now makes them a little bit curious and probably and hopefully as proud as we are in what our ancestors has done, and actually want to be part of seeing to it that this can continue to develop. So if we get some of them to take over where we are, we'll be very, very happy.
And it sounds to be sort of very inclusive as well, which reflects Sweden and its society.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yes, it has to be. I mean, everybody who has any idea of anything should be able to be part of this. Doesn't matter what you want to do. I mean, if there's someone who just want to work with Berit's foundation, we should give them the opportunity to do that. If somebody wants to work with the foundation on the business side, we should try to help them to find that route.
And you mentioned your broad experience, or your broader experience in the kind of international career that you had before getting more involved with the foundations. And what do you think that kind of brought to the foundations for you? What was the kind of key things that maybe came through from that?
I think if you look at the way that me, my brother, and my cousin work with each other today, we found for us a very natural way of dividing the different tasks. And I mean, they are business people more than I am. I love to run businesses and I love to work with people. So I think what I brought into it is that. I mean, I have, in that sense, Jacob and Marcus are extremely good at what they're doing. And I try to put my experience from a completely different business into everything that we do. So I shouldn't say that I know what I brought into it, but I think that I can be a little bit wider in that kind of questions than they are as business people or financially focused.
Which again helps to kind of move things forward as well at the same time, doesn't it? Particularly when you think what they're trying to do there.
Yeah, I think we complement each other very well because of that.
So, in your view, are there differences between how this generation and the next generation will lead the group and its interests, do you think?
I think the first thing is that since it is foundations and the statues of the foundations are 100 years old, that will not change. So I think the main goal will be the same. But I think the way that we run everything and look at what we do is different from the previous generation. And I think it's going to be the same for the next generation. We know in our discussions and meetings that we have with them that, questions that they bring up is, of course, sustainability and other questions that have always been on our agenda, but has been one of many. So I think it's just that there will be a focus on other questions, but I don't think there will be huge changes in, or it can't be due to the statutes of the foundation, be huge differences in what the foundations do or how we invest and things like that.
It's quite interesting there because you touched on the kind of roots and traditions. I would imagine that within the foundations and the businesses, that these kind of roots and traditions are very important. And I think for family businesses, especially, that tends to be something that they do refer back to. Yeah,
of course it is. I mean, as I said, I'm a proud member of the 5th generation, and I look back on what each generation has done throughout the years. One has to be proud. I mean, it's been different times, but has been the same goal all the time, and that is for the betterment of Sweden. Even if it's done in different ways, it's still the same focus, and it is still the same goal. And I think that's probably the main and most important thing.
Now, you touched on sustainability briefly there, and I'm going to maybe, if we've got time, move to explore that more later in the conversation. But what are particularly pressing issues, do you think, for the next generation?
I mean, the world around us is moving much faster. So I think that we're in the middle of something. We are three, and we know that we have a tough time to keep up. And so, of course, that will be a huge challenge for the next generation to be able to use all the changes that will happen for the benefit of everything that they're doing. But that's also one of the reasons that I hope that it's going to be more, at least more than one, but maybe not 10, but there will be more of the next generation who would like in different ways to work with the foundations and the businesses within the foundation.
So kind of taking that forward, if you were to look into the future, how do you think the Wallenberg Group might be organized in 10 years from now?
10 years?
Mm.
I'll be still around. No, I'm just kidding. My brother and cousin are much older than me, so no. I think in that sense, it will not be any huge differences. I think you will see that companies in our portfolios are different in some ways. But I think that what we are doing and how we are built as a structure will be the same in 10 years. Even though everything is moving extremely rapidly, we've been around doing about the same thing in different ways for over 100 years. So I don't think that will change a lot.
And what about 20 years from now?
Then I probably are not working any longer. It's 20 years is an extremely long period of time in today's times. As I said, with everything changing so rapidly, I wouldn't dare to have any guess in that sense. But the only thing I can really underline, and once again, I mean, our ancestors were pretty smart that they wrote the rules and regulations for the foundations in the way that they did, which means that huge differences will not be there. And as long as we find people who have the heart in this, even the companies within the portfolios will continue to grow long term and will be even stronger in 20 years. And the foundations will be able to give even more money to Swedish research and education.
But the foresight of those founders is absolutely incredible, isn't it? Really, when you think, you know, how it's.
Yeah, I mean, if you start to, oops, can you see me? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, if you start to read through the history books and read some of the documents from their time, yeah, I have to say that they were looking many years ahead of their own time in that sense.
And it's incredible to be part of that story.
Yeah, I'm being extremely proud, to be honest with you.
So
I know everybody's trying to get a hold of me someday. Yeah.
So what do you believe are the main strengths of family ownership in the business environment we have today?
I think if with the experience we have from family businesses in Sweden, I think it is the commitment. In that sense, I think that the development, always being trying to be in the forefront, because it is yours and your families. I think those are probably the most important parts. From our perspective, as I said, we're not a traditional family run business. So for us, it's more about being good at, what do you say in English? continue to develop something that somebody has started, you can help in seeing to it that it keeps on developing in your own time. But you don't really get you don't get the financial benefit or anything like that from it. But I think in a traditional family business, that is always going to be a part of it. But that also means that in many cases, family businesses only last 3 generations. And we're now trying to get in the 6 generations into ours. So I think family businesses are extremely important as call it a system, call it what you want. But it's also a complicated one because it is difficult to make that long term if it's only the family being the owners. And once again, I mean, the way that we are able to run this is a fantastic way of seeing to it that it can continue.
And it's a fascinating view as well on family business, I think, because it is.
It is.
Yeah.
But I mean, we live in Sweden, so I mean, not everyone thinks that foundations is a good way. When I know that when my grandfather, when he lived, there was a lot of people who said that, oh, but foundations just only try to get away from taxes. But we don't earn anything from this. Everything goes back to society. So, but that is, that's something that we have to work with, and that I work very hard with, and that is to make people understand how the ecosystem works, and that it is not us as individuals that make any profit from this. It is society that makes all the profits, which means it's actually tax money getting back into the system without going through bureaucracy.
And society benefits in so many different ways. It's not just
exactly
money going into the system, it's what it actually produces as well.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And what do you think are the main weaknesses, perhaps, then, of, sort of the way it's organised?
I don't think we have any. No. I think it's always a weakness in the change of a generation. Because once again, it's all about the individual wanting or not wanting to be part of it. And if there is none in the 6th generation who would like to continue with this, what does that mean? Who will then be taking the decisions for the foundations that are, and at the end of the day, have our family name on them, which means that whatever they do, it's going to fall back on the family. So I think that, but I don't call it a weakness in that sense. It's a difficult step. So I don't really see any weaknesses in at least in what we have. There are no weaknesses because we can be really bad at what we're doing, to be honest. But the foundations will continue to be part of Swedish society.
And do you have any other sort of advice for how this might be dealt with in the future? Or how other families might kind of pick up on things?
No, I wish I could. I mean, it is extremely difficult. It's also very different from country to country. As we know, I mean, our system works very well here in Sweden because we have a foundation system, which means that we are not getting taxed on the dividends that we get because we give them away. But we don't have to take from our cash in the foundations. But in the United States, you have to take from the capital in foundations. So they will not be able to last as long as we are. So it depends a lot on where you are and how you can use the different systems. And when I use the word use, I don't mean in a negative way or trying to get away from something else. What I'm saying is that depending on in which country you are, there are different ways of finding ways where it would be easier for families to be able to continue through generations with their businesses, and trying to find ways to see to it that it's not only 3 generations.
And actually,
but it's difficult.
Yeah. But as you kind of reflect on things as well, and you talked about research. So what do researchers offer the foundation?
What kind of research we do, or?
Well, what do they offer you? You know, why do you do it? What's the kind of core thing about it for you?
Could there be anything else? I mean, come on, it's the future. No, but for us, it's also about from the foundation's point of view. We're also working a lot with trying to see to it that the next generation of researchers gets a platform. So 10 years ago, we started to see to it that Swedish universities could attract young researchers, both Swedish researchers that were at foreign universities and bring them back to Sweden, and foreign young researchers that we needed in Sweden to see to it that we got the right type of research being done in Sweden. Today we have 400 of these young researchers at different universities in Sweden. So that's an important thing in what we're doing. But
and I think those kind of numbers are very important.
It is, and to be honest, I'm pretty proud that it's 50-50 male female also, which is good, which is something that we work very hard on from the foundation's point of view to see to it that the university. I mean, I travel around to all the universities in Sweden. I meet the researchers, and I realize that we don't get the applications for projects from the female researchers from the university. So, I mean, it's something that we've been pushing for many years to the universities, and we know they're there. How come you don't send their applications? This year, now, we actually have 60% of the project financing this year is for female researchers. So I mean, it takes time, but it's worth it because we know it's there. It's just that, you know, sometimes you need to poke and say, we know, you don't. So please listen and learn. But then, I mean, we're also in the situation being a foundation that we can be less bureaucratic. So which means that we can start projects much more rapidly than the politicians can do. So if you take our WASP project, which is within AI, autonomous systems, etc. I mean, we started a research school. We today have 22 companies being part of the research. And we go from, in Sweden, of having nothing within this research to being one of the leaders in Europe. And we've done that within 4 years. And we've been able to get international researchers to apply to Swedish universities to be part of WASP. So, I mean, we can help to see to it that, you know, what's good here can be used in a better way than we are doing. And we can take rapid decisions. So that's something that's, you know, we're proud of. And in most cases, it works. But it's also, you know, we started something called Wood Science Center at KTH and Chalmers. And that was to see to it, and it was all financed by us because we realized in both being owners within the forest industry and being part of the research community that there was nothing really being done when it came to the usage of the Swedish forestry. You know, you can't make paper out of everything and you can't just burn it. So what can we do with it? And today, I mean, those researchers are the one that you read about that put out solar cells in see-through windows, all made out of wood, or PET bottles made out of fibers instead of plastics, etc., etc. And when you realize that you've been part of starting things like this, and you see the effect of this, and these researchers, then you're really proud, and you understand how important foundations like ours can be. But we also realize that Sweden being a very, very small country, we need to see to it that everybody realize that we need to put, you know, both academia, business, private institutions like ours, and politics into this, and so that everybody realized they have to be part of and putting money into this, or Sweden will lag behind. And we can be a part of having that dialogue also, and spread the word in that sense, and try to find solutions to these kinds of problems. We tried it with COVID now too. I mean, we don't have any bureaucracy, so I mean, we put 100 million into the research around COVID rapidly, but we also saw to it that Sweden got their largest test center in place within 3 weeks, because we didn't have any capacity in Sweden, and that we can do because we are small, and we have the funds to help.
And again, when I saw how quickly you kind of moved there, I thought that was very impressive, considering what's happening elsewhere. But
yeah.
So, Peter, can we kind of move now to consider sustainability and its importance as a long-term focus, which also impacts on governance? And I want to do this because I know how important sustainability is for you, but also how it's always sat at the very heart of what the Wallenberg Foundations and family do.
Yeah.
So what is your point of departure when it comes to sustainability?
I think that talking about sustainability is sometimes extremely difficult, but because most people, when they talk about sustainability, they talk about the environment. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to widen it much wider than that, because sustainability is, of course, about the environment and the climate, but it's also about people in the community. It's innovation, it's research, it's business ethics and governance. So from our perspective, and I know you read the investors' book on how we work with this, and that's just one example. But those are the things that we bring forward in all the companies that we work with. We feel it's actually a sustainable question to see to it that in the rapidly changing environment when it comes to technology, companies should also put in reskilling and upskilling as part of the sustainable future, meaning that your biggest and most valuable resource is your staff, and you need to see to it that you use them going forward too. It's not that you just change them because things are changing around you. You have to take it and look at it as out of a complete perspective. So yes, all of these things are extremely important for us. We feel that is being responsible long-term owners. This is the main point. I mean, this is that we try to, in the boardrooms where we can be representatives of the foundation, we can bring these questions up and see, where are you? What are you doing? But once again, everything is moving extremely quick and very rapid. And I think one of the main problems is that you can find management in companies who believe they're doing a lot. But if you go 1 or 2 steps down in the organization, you're not doing very much. And how do you see to it as owners that this is something that is part of the DNA of the companies that you're running also? And I think that's the largest challenge. To talk about it, we're good at that. But we also need to see to it that we're good at getting it into the structure and being part of the company's DNA.
And what does sustainability, do you think, kind of mean to you as a business family? And I mean that, throughout the generations as well.
No, but it is our future. I mean, it's the company's future. If they don't take these questions seriously and work with it, who want to work with them? What kind of company will you be? What kind of products will you produce? So I think that it is one of the most important questions that any company have today, to see to it that you find your way of working in these and around these questions.
And how was sustainability introduced to you?
As I said, I was in the service industry, and I was running hotels. So one can say from that perspective, it was something that became pretty natural to me, because you get pretty pissed off, sorry about the language, when you realize that you throw away 40% of all the food that you have produced in a hotel or in a restaurant, and you realize that there is no way that you can use that in any other way. I mean, I can give you an example that running the Grand Hotel in Stockholm, we realized how much food we wasted every day. Of course, we tried to make things to do less, but it was still a huge amount. So we tried to find farmers who, pig farms and others who could then take the food. But Swedish laws of clean food is tougher for pigs than for people, so they were not allowed to eat our food, which makes it difficult. But it also meant that you started to look yourself in, okay, so what's another solution? What other questions is it that you can work with? Today, Grand Hotel is actually part of a completely closed system, made out of vacuum. So you have 3 tunnels going into the walls at the bottom of the hotel, where you can throw different kinds of waste that is then being taken care of in underground valves in Stockholm, used for heat and for other things. So I was introduced to it pretty early in that sense. But when it comes to business ethics and those kinds of questions, it is when you start to get into and being able to be a part of a board or something that you realize the complexity of companies going abroad, trying to do business abroad, and the follow-up questions that you get from that. Then you realize that these are new challenges. How do you solve these? How do you work in these questions? So I would say that pretty early, I was introduced in many different ways, and depending on the question, it's more or less difficult to find solutions for it.
And what does sustainability mean, do you think, for the portfolio companies and their activities?
Everything. Once again, I think it is their future. And that's the reason I'm saying that it is important for us to point this out to them and make them understand that we as owners are on top of the question, meaning we bring it up, we want answers. But most of our companies are doing very well and work with it. But you have to learn that it's not only what happens within your own walls. It's who's delivering what from where and how. You have a supplier in another country. How do they do their products? It's much more difficult and much wider to some of these companies. But one should give them credit that they're doing a heck of a job. But once again, everything is moving so fast that you really need to be on the top of your toes all the time in these questions, because it changes so fast.
And in terms of the kind of the boards of the firms that you work with, how do you kind of work with sustainability there? How do you kind of ensure that it is included in their thinking, their design, their way of delivering?
It is something that we see to it that it is on the agenda of board meetings, so that we get a report. But I think that we need to take it one more step and see to it that it goes further down. A board meeting is a board meeting, but is that reality in all senses, or is that a presentation for the members of the board? So I think we need to find ways of getting a deeper understanding of how it works further down in the structure of companies. It's going to be difficult, but I mean, we have to find ways.
And would you say that the role of sustainability then has been changing? And you mentioned a couple of examples when we were talking about governance as well. But do you think that the role of sustainability has really been changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And as I said, I mean, working with the sixth generation, I know it's something that they're poking at us and say, what are you doing? What is the foundations doing? So I made a very short study. I asked the office to go through all the applications for different projects at the foundation to see how many were around sustainability. And we realized that in the application, it was not a lot. but you realize that in close to 90%, the effect of the project had to do with sustainability. So, and that's also important to realize that it's not always that, you get an application that says, I want to change this or do this better. But during the time of the research, they will realize that there are things that will change and use it, see to it that it's actually being brought out to be used by others. So I think that's good. I mean, I'm not going to push researchers in that way because I know they will get there. It doesn't matter what they do research about. This will be part of what comes out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I see you as leaders in sustainability issues, but I just wondered if you consider yourselves as leaders in sustainability issues within your industries. And I like the way that the perspective that you take on the whole kind of sustainability issue.
I can say this: you can never say that you're good at something like this, because that would mean that you would relax. And I think what's important here is to see to it that you follow up and change with time and the questions that will come up, instead of getting stuck in something that you felt you were doing good.
Thank you. Is there anything more that you would like to add at this stage?
No. No, it was a pleasure to be here. It's always difficult. It's a new way of life right now, doing things like this over Zoom or Teams or something else. Life will probably not be the same after all of this. I think we learned a lot of positive things. We learned a lot of negative things, but I think that we will be more efficient after this.
I hope so. Yeah.
I know. Let's say we will.
We will. That's it.
Yeah, good. Good.
So, thank you for that. And I'd really like to end this session. I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious that you're a very busy person as well. And thank everybody for listening. But I'd also like to say a very big thank you to you, Peter, for taking the time to speak with us today and for sharing your thoughts and experiences. And we're extremely grateful. Thank you. And I know that I've learned a lot from listening from you today, but I always do. I always find it very fascinating. And I'd also like to thank Professor Matthias Nordquist, who kind of helped us form the questions as well and develop the questions for today. So thank you as that. We have some time left, I think, Bo, do we? About 5 minutes left, if there's anybody who would like to ask a question.
We do.
Bo, was there anything, I noticed you're kind of bit in the chat and I picked up on that, but I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that.
I have been monitoring the chat and I got a couple of messages. Maybe I can convey some of those questions. So maybe not all of the listeners, everybody who's online can understood the relationship between all these companies, the crown jewels of Swedish industrialism, and many new companies that you own or own part of. Mm-hmm. There's some stages here with the foundations and investor. Could you talk for a couple of minutes about just how that structure looks?
Absolutely. The Foundations is the largest shareholder of the public investment company Investor. Investor own companies like ABB, Atlas Copco, Electrolux, Ericsson, Wärtsilä, Finland, etc. But they're all public companies. On the other side, we have a privately owned investment company called FAM, Foundation Asset Management, where we own companies like, or have stock in companies like Stora Enso, Saab, smaller companies like Höganäs, Nefab, and others. And then one should add that Investor has a sister company called Patricia Investments, or Patricia Industries. And in Patricia Industries, you have companies like Mölnlycke within healthcare, They actually own the Grand Hotel and other smaller companies that they own 100% or are the majority shareholder of. Did that explain enough? I can go even further, but
no, that's great. But you talked extensively about the role of the family here, and what is the you want to engage the next generation and so on. What's the extent of the family? How far into this vast
these businesses are we?
Yeah.
One can say that me, my brother, and my cousin, we represent the foundations on board levels. My brother is the chairman of Investor. My cousin Marcus is the chairman of the SEB Bank. I'm the chairman of the Wallenberg Foundations company. And then we work a lot with seeing to it that the boards of these companies have the competence that is needed to see to it that they will continue to develop. And if we look at how do we work with the next generation in these questions, we put the next generation first in the boards of the different foundations. So they start to learn the work or learn board work by being members of the foundations board, realizing, you know, what it means and what you have to do as a board member. It's not just to sit and listen. You have to be an active board member, being part of helping to develop whatever board you're working on and the company it represents. And hopefully this will lead to that they get good enough and interested enough to want to go further and go into company boards. And in that sense, we will see to it that their names come up, but it's not we as family who take the decision of the board members of the different companies. We have a, what do you call it in English? Valberedning.
Nomination committee.
Thank you, nomination committee. Which is not run by us, so it you know, we're being very in that sense open-minded and as we say, I mean, we're not a job office for the next generation. They need to see to it that they are the ones with the drive and the interest of continue to develop.
Thank you. That's great. Those were my questions, Sarah.
Thank you. I think that's us then. I'm conscious that it's, yeah, we're almost there. Gosh, wow.
You were a little bit scared, weren't you, Sarah?
Perfect. Thank you both very much. We start again at 2:40 local time. That is in 14 minutes. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Thanks, Peter.
Have a good conference.
Thanks.
Bye.